This is Cow Bites, the technical segment for the Cow Talks podcast, with your host, Marcelo Valal, or the Extension Specialist for the University of Florida. But what about grazing management? There's a big misconception, especially fueled by some recent movements in terms of grazing management, that equates rotational stalking, as it properly said, or rotational grazing, as it's mostly known, as proper grazing management, whereas continuous stalking is bad. There are many other factors that need to be considered before we define the stalking management of our herd. One of the main ones is actually called the herbage allowance, meaning how much forage we have in relation to how much forage we need for our animals. If that balance is negative, meaning if we need more forage than we can produce, then we are in trouble. There is nothing that's going to fix other than destocking. Any management strategy that we may apply, it's only going to have very limited impact when we are overstocked. That results in overgrazing, that results in pasture deterioration, and that results in extra expenses in feeding and lower income because we're limiting animal production. Herbage allowance is very complicated, especially to apply in a production setting, because it involves the dynamic measurement of the forage availability and the dynamic demand of the animals that include growth and also other aspects of herd management. That's why many times we talk about the stocking rate. The stocking rate is the amount of animal units per area. It's very simple to measure, it's an easy approach, and can give us a good reference in terms of where we are in relation to the carrying capacity. Stocking rate is simply the amount of animal units per area. It's only a one-sided measurement because we don't know about the pasture. But if that stocking rate is accompanied by at least the type of pasture we can have an idea if we are overstocked or understocked or close to where we need to be. But for example, if you consider 2 animal per acre a stocking rate, you are going to say, well, it's very high. Well, if we're talking about Bahia grass that we need 2 acres per animal, then it's quite high. But if you think about sorghum, for example, that has a greater biomass production and faster growth, then that stocking rate is probably adequate. But the most important part about the stocking rate is that it needs to be defined by the carrying capacity of our pasture. And the carrying capacity of our pasture is how much our pasture can support in terms of grazing, in terms of animal units, for us to achieve our production goals without detriment to our pasture. Only after we ensure that our stocking rate is proper, or better, that our herbage allowance is adequate, is that other management practices, such as the definition of the stocking strategy, are going to make a difference. For example, now once we know that our pastures are properly stocked, we can utilize of rotational stocking to improve our herbage utilization and a little bit of our herbage production. In general, rotational stocking will provide about 30% greater productivity per area in terms of final animal product because of the slightly better utilization and also because of the potentially better pasture growth. Now, both pasture growth and how it is utilized is also dependent on other factors. For example, pasture growth is going to depend on weather patterns, on weather events, and also on fertilization, and also how we're grazing that. If our rotational stocking system is going to try to utilize most of the forage, meaning we're grazing down to the ground, we're removing a lot of forage biomass, and our residual leaf area, our residual biomass after grazing is small, it's going to result in slow growth. So that is going to limit the benefits of rotational stocking. Likewise, in terms of productivity, if our rest intervals are very long, especially here where we have strong active growth during the growing season, our forage is going to be mature. It's going to reduce growth, is going to reduce quality. So that is also detrimental for both forage and for animal production. So again, there is much more to it than only rotational or continuous stocking. Unfortunately, most of the discussions in extension, in trade journals, and even in some agencies are focused on this misguided difference between one and the other. Whereas we should be talking about other basic concepts before we can get to the definition of which stocking management we're going to use. This podcast was produced by Marcelo Valau and Ashley Kuhn and brought to you by the University of Florida IFAS Forage Team.